In this presentation, we will be discussing the social learning theory and the behavioral theory. We will begin this presentation with a discussion about what each of these theories entail and the theorists behind these ideas. Next, we will examine how these two theories relate to each other, as well as what factors separate them. Finally, we will view two possible scenarios that are related to applications of each of these theories in real life. We hope that after watching this presentation, viewers will gain a deeper understanding of how the social learning theory and the behavioral theory can be applied in real world settings, and how these two theories can be studied with regards to child behavior and development. First theory that we will discuss is the social learning theory, which was developed by American psychologist Albert Bandura. Bandura earned his bachelor's degree at the University of British Columbia and went on to study psychology and clinical psychology at the University of Iowa. Bandura is well known for his development of the social learning theory as well as the Bobo doll study, which we will cover in more detail later on in this presentation. So, before the social learning theory was technically quote unquote established, it was a jumble of ideas taken from two different theories known as the psychoanalytic theory and the stimulus response learning theory. According to a research article that is cited on this slide, the ideas behind the other two theories can be accredited to a psychologist named Robert Sears. Bandura focused less on the ideas behind these original two theories and more on the cognitive and information processes of human behavior. So, some basics about this theory. The social learning theory basically states that people learn and develop based on the behaviors they see in other people in their life, as well as other forces in the environment around them. A huge aspect of this theory is the ability of a person to observe and then model and imitate behaviors they see in those around them. According to a Simple Psychology article written by Saul McLeod, the social learning theory recognizes environmental and cognitive factors in a person's life and how these factors influence learning and the development of behavior. The social learning theory recognizes models, which are influential people in a person's life, as the main source of impact on a person's development. For example, models present in a child's life can include their parents, siblings, teachers, friends, and even people on social media or TV. Bandura additionally found that children tend to specify model people who may control resources or whom they see as prestigious or whom seem to be rewarded for a certain behavior. So, the social learning theory can be seen in our everyday lives. Let's look at an example. And before we begin, just a disclaimer, these are my suite mates and they all agreed to be actors and they agreed for these pictures to be shown, so it's all good. So, in this first picture, it shows a girl who's holding the green dinosaur, um, playing nicely with this toy while her younger sister, who's sitting on the floor, is watching her. The mother walks into the room and sees the older girl playing nicely with this toy, and therefore comments on how gently she is playing, praising her for keeping herself occupied in a non disruptive way. The younger sister takes note of how the older sister gets praised for these behaviors. Then the girls decide to continue on with their play, and the younger sister mimics the older sister in how she plays with the toy. Later on, the mother walks in to check on the girls again and finds that they are now both playing nicely with their toys, therefore praising both of them. In this scenario, the older sister acted as a model for the younger sister to base her decisions and behaviors off of. The younger sister saw that her older sister was rewarded for playing nicely and therefore was more inclined to act this way because of the praise from her mother. This is an example of how the social learning theory plays a role in development and behavior in real life.
The next social theory that we will be looking into is the behavioral theory, or otherwise known as behaviorism. One of the founding scholars is John Watson, but some other important people to mention are the neurologist Ivan Pavlov and psychologist B.F. Skinner. As we delve into behavioral theory, we will understand these individuals' contributions along with the core ideas and values that behavioral theory holds. The main founders, John Watson and B.F. Skinner, started this way of thought in response to introspective psychology in the 19th century. They believed it better to focus on observable and quantifiable behaviors. Their aim was to show psychology was not just a bunch of opinions, but could be a measurable science. Behavioral theory believes that psychologists should not focus on internal processes, but rather on external influences. The behavioral theory says we cannot rely on our interpretation of internal processes. We have to observe behavior. Basically, two people can be internally thinking two opposite thoughts, but if they behave in the same exact way, it doesn't matter what their internal thoughts entailed. Behavioral theory believes that children learn all behaviors and that parents are entirely responsible for how a child behaves. It explains that a child can turn out to be anything depending on how they are raised. This theory does not give any credit nor fault to genetics whatsoever. Two other contributors worthy of note are Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. These two individuals are responsible for classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is when an outside stimulus is related to an unconditioned response. This eventually leads to the outside stimulus causing the unconditioned response, which in turn then makes it a conditioned response. Ivan Pavlov is the one responsible for a famous and well-known classical conditioning experiment. In this experiment, dogs were conditioned to salivate to the sound of a bell. The bell acts as the outside stimulus. Dogs naturally salivate when their food is being brought out to them, so this is an unconditioned response. Every time the scientists brought out the food for the dogs, they simultaneously rang a bell. This caused the dogs to start salivating to the ringing of the bell before they even had sight of food. Even when there was no food present, the dogs were classically conditioned to salivate at the ringing of the bell. The second form of conditioning is operant conditioning, which was founded by B.F. Skinner. Operant conditioning is when a behavior is either rewarded or punished, and depending on which response the behavior enacts, the person is either more likely or less likely to repeat the behavior. Skinner is also responsible for reinforcers, punishers, and neutral operants. A reinforcer is a response that increases the likelihood of a behavior, while a punisher is a response that decreases the likelihood of a behavior. A neutral operant is a response that does neither increase nor decrease the likelihood of a certain behavior. There are positive and negative types of punishers and reinforcers. Positive ones try to encourage behaviors, while negative ones try to deter behavior. Now we have some similarities and differences. So, from the social learning theory perspective, we have Albert Bandura agreed with a lot of the principles behind the behavioral theory, such as that people can learn behavior through both classical and operant conditioning. However, Bandura also felt that behavior is not just a process of reacting to stimuli and then learning from these reactions. He believed that there are mediating processes, such as other people, that occur between and can therefore affect these stimuli and responses. And from the behavioral theory perspective, we have that social learning theory and behavioral theory are similar in that they both believe to some extent that people can learn from outside environments, whether it be a model, positive reinforcement, observational learning, or negative punishment. They are different in the sense that behavioral theory seems to place a strong focus on children and how they develop in the home and parents' responsibilities, whereas social learning theory focuses more on learning through social interactions, personal experiences, direct communication, and modeling. Behavioral theory can be useful in parenting, teaching, babysitting, and much more. It is particularly useful when working with children who misbehave. In my application video, I show how it can be applied to a family setting. This video will show a real-life scenario that incorporates behavioral theory. The setting is a family with two parents and two children. Let's say that we have a youngest child being disrespectful towards their parents. Next, we'll see the older child displaying similar characteristics towards the parents. Now let's pretend that this child gets their phone taken away for being bad. Next, the family goes to family therapy to figure out all these behavioral issues. And then, after family therapy, they figure it out and they're all happy. So, in conclusion, the therapist explains that the youngest child has learned the disrespectful behavior from the older child, which is why the youngest was behaving in such a disrespectful manner. The therapist also explains that negative punishment is not very effective. It's actually the least effective form of discipline. After addressing to both children that disrespectful behavior is not okay and implementing different disciplinary actions like positive reinforcements, we saw at the end that the family was healthy and happy and had worked all their behavioral issues out. And here are my references from this slideshow presentation and from the video. So, in conclusion, the social learning theory basically states that people learn and develop based on the behaviors they see in other people in their life, as well as other forces in the environment around them. A huge aspect of this theory is the ability of a person to observe and then model and imitate behaviors they see in those around them. It was developed by Albert Bandura and can be applied to a scenario like we saw earlier of a young sibling learning from an older sibling. Behavioral theory believes that children learn all behaviors and parents are responsible for how a child behaves. It also states that people form behavior patterns based on reinforcers and punishers. This theory was developed by John Watson and can be applied to a real life scenario of a family having behavioral issues like the video that we just watched. Thank you for watching, and we hope you have a better understanding of social learning theory and behavioral theory.